this situation, you know, it is really about whether or not GM is going to put new work into these plants, or whether this is a smokescreen for offshoring work. And the way that the contracts work, the GM is going to have to negotiate this with the auto workers, and that's going to happen. That question of where that new work goes is going to mean an enormous amount to not just the 15,000 people who've been laid off here, but to perhaps as many as 70, 80,000 people whose jobs are indirectly or directly dependent on those plants. This is top of the food chain work, and this decision is incredibly destructive to American communities, and the working people of the United States are ready to fight it.
So, you know, the president has been very critical of companies that have offshored work. Do you believe that General Motors would take an opportunity like this to move the production of sedan-type cars, which are apparently not selling, into production facilities in Mexico or elsewhere around the world? Is yeah.
Is that
what you expect them to do?
We're quite concerned about that. You know, these kinds of decisions about locating final assembly for auto brands are big capital investment decisions that are not made quickly. And it's pretty clear that they knew that these decisions were coming when GM recently decided to put the Blazer line in Mexico and not in the Lordstown plant, where many people in the auto industry expected them to do it. Mm-hmm. And in terms of where President Trump is, obviously President Trump said a few words yesterday, but the policies of his administration have essentially encouraged companies like GM to move work offshore by giving tax breaks when they do it. And so, you know, I don't think you should be terribly surprised that this kind of game playing is potentially going on.
Take me into that a little bit more, because his public posture has been, as you know, quite the opposite. And I'm surprised to hear that, and forgive me for not knowing it, about tax breaks to move things offshore.
The tax bill that President Trump fought for and signed last year gives effectively a tax rate of 22% if you make your money creating jobs in the United States, and a tax rate of between 0 and 10% if you make your money creating jobs offshore. And it doesn't take a financial genius to see that that's a subsidy to move work offshore.
So the president also said yesterday that he wanted General Motors to put something new into the Ohio area specifically, I believe is what he said. What would that be?
Well, the GM is suggesting that they are going to put new models. They're going to introduce new models to replace the models that they are ending. Mm-hmm. And the question is, where will those models be built? And they could be built in these plants where you've got a whole infrastructure, a whole set of skilled workers, you know, ready to do the job, or they could be built offshore. GM has a history, and is particularly bad relative to Ford and Chrysler. GM has a history of looking for every kind of excuse to move work offshore for decades, and to take advantage of, you know, all the things that are wrong, say, with NAFTA or with our trading relationship with China. And so, you know, auto workers are really worried that that's what's going to happen here. And as I said earlier, GM recently announced they were going to put the new Blazer line, a final assembly line, in Mexico. A lot of people thought that line should go to the very plant that President Trump was talking about, the Lordstown plant in Ohio. You know, GM has not been forthcoming about what models they're going to launch, and, you know, for obvious competitive reasons. But as soon as they do, there's going to be a fight about this. And, you know, what President Trump does in this fight in a sustained way, it's not about like what you say in 30 seconds in front of a camera, but what he does in a sustained way is going to matter. But there's a deeper issue here. Among the plants that are being closed are plants, the one not very far from where I am in Maryland, are plants that make drivetrains, and they make transmissions, and they make drivetrains for electric vehicles. And that's the future of the auto industry. And if that gets moved offshore, you're talking about a strategic catastrophe from the perspective of the U.S. economy and the U.S. auto industry. And the Trump administration has done everything it can to discourage the manufacture of alternative technology vehicles in this country, the very thing President Trump is talking about, the attack on the CAFE standards, is essentially undermines the argument for making that critical 21st century technology in the United States.